Where are you on fats? I mean, Gabriel Cousins is saying that you need these fats. These people last night were saying you don't want fats. They're not saying don't. They're saying this should be a moderate part of your diet. So we want to understand avocados, olives, raw seeds, raw nuts, and oil. Are we trying to eat as much as we can, as little as we can, in the middle? Why are they saying not to go near fats? Answer the question on raw whole food plant fats, raw seeds, raw nuts, avocados, olives, and then you could separately talk about oil. What should we think about this subject, this question?
So let me start by saying I have enormous respect for people like Dr. McDougall, who was the first medical doctor who stuck his neck out 50 years ago and told people to eat a plant-based diet. And the other, Michael Clapper, worked here with us at Hippocrates at one point. Now, the way that they view the world is through the reductionist ideology of allopathic science. So it's not really about what's good for you, what we can add. It's about when we remove certain elements from the diet, what benefits do we have? Now, grant you, when you remove animal-based foods from a diet, that in and of itself is an enormous benefit to liberate the human body to function with homeostasis and more balance. Our approach since 1956 has not been a scientific model that is based upon allopathic ideologies. It is one to go to the most progressive areas of healthcare. Most of the scientists that we read and admire and hold conferences on this campus with are not singing Kumbaya and going along with everyone else. And we do clinical research. Now, all of these wonderful people have done great work and they have private practices. Not one of those people have an institute that has existed for 65 years, where we have a medical team and we literally do clinical work, looking and observing at what people do, what their blood test does, the benefits and long-term outcomes over years, not just a week or a month or a visit in an office. And from that, the cutting edge science that we choose to follow and what we've discovered here, fats are very important for the human body. As a matter of fact, there's only two ways generally a human body gets physical energy. One is either sugar, which is a bad story, and the second one is fat. Now, carbohydrates break into sugar, but there's two kinds of fats too. The kind of fat that I grew up eating was the opposite. It took away my energy. It clogged my veins. This is why they have good results when they take people off animal-based foods. That's called saturated fats. In the world of plant-based foods, the only one with high saturated fats are palm oils, coconut and palm oils. Everything else is an animal-based food. The second type, which we are major advocates of, in moderation, not in extreme amounts, is what we call essential fats. Oleic acids are what they're called scientifically, and they're omega-3, omega-6, omega-9. And the more data and the more research that's conducted on this globally, the more convinced we are that every man, woman, and child require this as one of their central, or in some cases, major fuel in their body. Now, can you overdo anything? Of course you can. So can people go completely crazy and say to you, for instance, I'm eating 5 pounds of these fats a day because Brian Clement and Hippocrates said it was good. That's not what we said. In moderation. We also, our medical team that's led by Anna Maria, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, and also our worldwide network of cutting edge scientists, not people all reading from the same psalm book, but cutting edge scientists, pretty much individualize it. So if I'm dealing with a person who just had a heart attack and stroke, I would certainly lean on my colleague and my friend, Dr. Esselstyn. When he said, don't take any oils, he comes through a window of that. And Dr. Esselstyn has had such an enormous influence on the new generation of conventional alternative doctors that you just mentioned some of them, that they pretty much tell you that all oils, including good oils, are going to clog up the interior part of the vein. Well, that's a theory. We also know from major studies that have been conducted in several universities in several countries around the world that we see that people, when they get older and they don't lose their memory, they're acutely awake, as we say, they tend to have high fats without high saturated fats involved. And so we see people at 100 years old with good memories. Well over 90% of these people are having high saturated fats. So we individualize. If you have cancer, it's one thing. You have diabetes, it's one thing. If you're an athlete, when I'm training Olympic athletes here, I'm going to give them a whole lot more fat than I would take or you would take, Steve. So we agree to disagree on this. And the view I have, quite simply, is that that's the latest pop ideology that this group of doctors have. And that's been about 3-4 years. Give them a while, they'll change, as I've seen them over the decades.
So if someone's listening at home, did you just say have one avocado at lunch and one avocado at dinner? Did you say have 2 avocados at lunch and 2 avocados at dinner? Did you say have a bag of almonds? Like what did you just say? I'm
saying when we give advice, we have reports in front of us. We know what the person's going through. Are you a super athlete? Do you have stage 4 cancer? Do you have diabetes? Have you just had a heart attack? So we individualize that. So do we think saturated fat is good for everyone at some level? No. Do we think omega oils are good, oleic acids are good for everyone at some level? Yes, we do. So that's the answer. And so individualizing this is really what matters in each and every case, personalizing.
So if someone is having some health issues, not cancer, but they have, they're 20 pounds overweight, their blood pressure is a little high, they have a little bit of diabetes, high blood sugar. What are you telling them at lunch and dinner regarding avocados and olives and seeds and nuts? Are they
a person like that that's trying to lose weight? We'd probably say a half an avocado 4 or 5 days a week. We're saying a handful of nuts 3 days a week. Here, the general routine we have for the general populace at the Institute is we only have nuts and seed as main courses twice a week. Other days we may offer seed sauce made out of sprouted. Now remember, we're not talking about just normal nuts that are really hard to digest. We germinate them, we sprout them, we liberate them. The essential fats become omega oils. I mean, what you have to understand, when you germinate something, it is a radical different food than if you eat it in its whole form. So that's why when we break it down to a simple essential fatty acid, it becomes remarkably easier to digest. Now, I think the conversation we should have is oils that are taken from these things. And you have to understand 1 tablespoon of, for instance, corn oil, they have 12 ears of corn that make that. That's a lot of corn. Would you eat 12 ears of corn? At one point, I would have eaten 24, but most people no. And so these are the considerations. Olive oil has a lot more oil. So maybe 4 olives, certain kinds of olives would make a tablespoon of oil. And does a person have an oxygen deprivation problem? Would I tell somebody with a virus that was going on a respirator that it was a great thing to eat oils? The answer is no. And so, good practitioners don't generalize. They just have general ideas, what's good and what's bad. And then we individualize and personalize.
Yeah, I would just add maybe, I've been able to, I'm really privileged, I feel, to be going to Hippocrates now for, gosh, probably 10 or 15 years, giving lectures. And then, as we just heard, we were there for about 2.5 to 3 months. And it's fantastic to see all these people coming through from, traditionally it was all from all over the world, a lot of people from Europe. This last year was more Americans, but with all kinds of problems, ranging from being overweight, like you were saying, Steve, diabetes or cancer, and just seeing these really practically miraculous transformations in many people. Their bodies loosen up, their strength comes back, the weight goes off, their cancers reduce or go away. And it's very clear that what I just want to underline what we just heard from Brian, because I think most people, when they think of eating seeds, they're just eating regular nuts and seeds. But when you sprout them, and the Hippocrates has been really at the cutting edge, I think, of understanding the benefits of sprouting, and really not just theoretically, but actually with people and trying things out and seeing what works. And I have to say, being there week in and week out and eating that food, it's like your body starts really transforming in a positive way. We've always eaten a healthy vegan diet, very similar to what Brian's talking about. But I think at that place, it's a good thing for people to be aware of, because they only have the highest quality foods. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. It's really important to get high quality, like organic, whole foods from the best possible sources, because our planet right now is awash in toxic chemicals. And these chemicals are really, I think, the driving force behind a lot of the diseases that we're having. We like to blame it very often on viruses and other things, but really it's these chemicals. And so the kind of way that Hippocrates is recommending people eat, it's really about cleansing, like cleansing and detoxifying. And I think it's good to question the thing about oils, because a good, healthy, like avocados and so forth, I think there's a cleansing quality to those. At least that's been my experience. We seem to don't get sick on that, on the food there. And it seems to be cleansing very much.
Okay. The next question I'd like to ask you is, last night's panel pretty much said, aside from B12, John McDougall was saying that supplements are not part of his plan. I think I'm quoting him correctly. And I think Michael Clapper and Pam Popper was really not suggesting supplements, aside from B12. Maybe there's one. I don't think they were really suggesting supplements. And I guess for all the people out there, a lot of us have an intuition about what to do with food. But when it comes to supplements, I guess, what is the general basics? Like, if every day you're saying everyone should have a green juice, everyone should have wheatgrass, everyone should have 2 big salads filled with sprouts and green vegetables. When it comes to supplements, what's the non-negotiable list that every man, woman, and child, or every adult at least, are you saying, if they could afford it, what are the 10 supplements that you feel we all should be having? I know it's hard to do without blood reports and knowing deficiencies, but as a general rule, what are the 10 most basic, most important supplements that you feel everyone listening to this call wants to make sure they're taking each day?
So here at the Institute, we give everybody a core kit to really educate people about things that we have seen through all these years that people need. And it has vitamin D. It has a soil-based bacteria form of B12. It has enzymes, digestive enzymes. It has systemic enzymes. And it has probiotic and algae, like chlorella. So these are the 6 ones that we, for sure, like the basics for people to be able to have a healthy lifestyle, especially because our soil is so depleted. So, people really understand, and this is something that people want to continue when they leave here. So this is the basics. Of course, in our life, we take a lot of supplements as we want to have the ultimate health ourselves too.
Yeah, so now I would add to that list, since you've asked for 10, and Anna Maria will report to you once again and repeat the ones we give you in the core kit. So be clear on what we're giving.
We give soil-based bacteria form of B12.
Life Give B12.
Yes, it's all Life Give, and then it's vitamin D, systemic enzymes, and digestive enzymes, probiotics, and algae, the chlorella form.
I would add to that list a multi-mineral, and the best company we found on the planet is Eden, E-D-I-O-N, because people tend to lack this. I would also add a food-based, a Life Give type of vitamin C, and the Life Give brand is completely, absolutely raw and organic and active. So that's number 2. And number 3, I would also add a type of clay when people are beginning to cleanse. So the best company for that is Premier Labs, and they have an edible clay in veggie caps, and that helps to cleanse the body. Now, let me reflect on people who say no supplements. I happen to be in that camp when I joined the Hippocrates team in 1975, because I had an idea, incorrect, unfortunately, but an idea that if you eat this extremely nutritious diet, not a cooked vegan diet, which isn't an extremely nutritious diet, but this extremely nutritious diet, why the heck would you need supplements? Well, that was really a great thing in 1975. The mistake they made is they made me director, Anna Marie and I director in 1980. And then the responsibility was squarely on my lap. And I started to do very elaborate testing on people who looked perfectly healthy to me, who was often on a healthy plant-based living diet for a long time. And I found out a high percentage of these people were lacking nutrients. Not only B12, I'm on my 34th year of looking at B12 deficiencies. And as earlier today, Dr. Cousins mentioned, about 7 out of 10 of us lack it. It's not a vegan problem. It's meat eater problem, fish eater problem, all of them, as well as vegan, because I don't want to get elaborate in this. We lack a part of our gastrointestinal tract that de-evolved over centuries. So unlike my colleagues, we see the use of proper supplementation accelerate the building of the immune system to save people's lives. I'm not interested in being a purist. I'm interested in being a realist. And there's a big difference. And I'm going to tell you, Anna Marie and I get up every day other than fasting day. We take 37 supplements. And I don't have a deficiency and Anna Marie doesn't have a deficiency. You don't have to wait till you're deficient or wait till you're sick to do the right thing. But I can tell you, today I started my day at 4:30 in the morning. I'll end it at 10:30 tonight. And I have all the energy to do that. Today I was on The Real Truth About Health for 2 hours now. And I did an hour-and-a-half lecture in a park an hour and a half away from here today. Now, I can assure you, I wouldn't have that energy if I didn't take those supplements these other folks think aren't necessary. And all I can tell you, at 70 years old, I think I've done pretty well taking the supplements.
Brian, excuse me, this is James. Your video has frozen.
Oh,
The video is frozen. Okay.
Now it's working. And Will, your volume needs to be a little bit louder.
Okay.
And that wasn't the video, that was my face.
Thank you.
now we're out again.
No, you're good. We can see you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, any questions?
Will, did you have anything you want to say on that, or?
No, actually, I think, quite honestly, I think what Brian and Anna Marie were just saying, they obviously have a lot more experience working with literally tens of thousands of people on a daily basis over many years, not only me, but by probably anybody on earth. So I think, and how Brian just explained his evolution, We've come along pretty much the same way in our lives, and I have to say I'm thrilled with the health that I have. I'm not quite as old. I'm only 67, but but I think having a lot of energy and being healthy and having that to count on and traveling all over the world and not getting sick, in China and India and all these places. We've also evolved. We don't take a lot of supplements, but when you were the kind of things that they were mentioning, like probiotics, Madeline always makes probiotic drinks and yogurts and things. We have mushrooms and seaweed, vitamin B12 we always have been taking. And we always get a lot of sun, of course, for vitamin D. The algae we do, we think that's really important. The minerals, we also, she's very avid about that. So I think there's a lot of truth, personally, experience to what they're saying. And I think, of course, it's always good to get nutrients from the foods that we're getting primarily, but with the various, deficiencies in soil and so forth, I think we have to just be proactive and make sure that the supplements are, like they're saying, they're really high quality, like whole foods types of things, not just these. I think John McDougall and others have really rightfully taught us that when we buy these, my mother was given by the doctor some calcium tablets or whatever. They give them the stuff, and people think of when they think of supplements. They think, oh yeah, I'm taking my one a day multiple vitamin, and these are just, as I understand it, pretty much worse than taking nothing. I mean, they're giving people things that are not in a very easily biologically assimilated way, which actually causes more harm than good. So it's very important when we say this word supplement that we really rule out those kinds of commercial supplements that are really part of the drug industry. And we look at the kind of things they're talking about at Hippocrates, which are really completely different. I mean, these are really very, I don't know what to say. They're like cutting edge things that are nutrients that we would have been getting probably 10,000 years ago when things were wild crafted and naturally filled with life force. And nowadays we have to be more savvy, and again, they're testing these things really in the fire of having all these people and being able to see how it affects them. So it's a really tremendous resource, I think, that they're bringing here to this discussion.
Yeah, you may want to read my book and look at the conference I've done in the years past at The Real Truth called Supplements Exposed. And it exposes, so this is why a lot of them in a callous way just dismiss all supplements, because most are dangerous to take, just like Dr. Tuttle just said. They are pharmaceutical drugs, and they are dangerous and harmful and decrease your health and weaken your immune system. On the other hand, about 9% are terrifically healthy for you and really act as foods would have 1,000 years ago. When the soils were here, the foods were different, the primal plants were available, and we just don't have them. Remember, we are taking food-based supplements on top of eating the most nutritious diet on the planet Earth. So we're not only interested in taking supplements, that's a joke. You have to start. You can take all the supplements I am, double or triple. If you don't have a good diet, you're not going to be well.
Okay, so that was a very clear answer. You listed 9 supplements, and we appreciate it because a lot of us have a difficult time sorting through all the information about supplements. Go with it a little further. In other words, we're really desperate to get this answer clear. We're all over the place. Everyone has got their own ideas. You mentioned 9 supplements: vitamin D, B12, enzymes, systemic enzymes, probiotics, algae, multiminerals from iodine, food-based vitamin C, a type of edible clay from Premier Labs. And obviously you're recommending getting these from appropriate sources, where to get each of these things from. If you were going to continue past 9, what additional supplements would you add to this list that from the 37 you take? What would also be appropriate pretty much for everyone that you think would be important to add to this list? Because again, if we don't hear it tonight, there's a good chance we're going to get lost and never know it. So you listed 9. Give us more. Give us more that you're clear on.
So as we do most days, this morning, Anna Marie and I got up and we took 4 other algae beyond the chlorella. One is called blue-green algae. The second is called phytoplankton. The third is called sea algae. And the fourth is a combination of different seaweeds or sea algae that is in a green product we make called Life Gives Super Greens. Now, beyond that, we take ashwagandha as a powder, which is a calming agent. We take the powder of a bean from Africa called 5-HTP. I take extracts from the leaf of a papaya to maintain platelet counts. We take additional CBD oil on top of that. We take a product that's with adaptogens, a living product out of Canada, and that's a liquid. Matter of fact, Anna Maria's father, 93-year-old Swedish man over there, his eyesight has come back, his energy levels have. Just taking that one, we couldn't get him to take much, we could get him to take that. He begs us for it all the time. So these are the kind of things that we're taking on an ongoing basis. Now, remember, not to be sounding like a salesman for supplementation. We have learned that we do well on all of these things. I also get up in the morning, I drink about 1.5 quarts of fluid before I leave the home. And some of these powders are mixed into this with these shaker bottles, non-BPA shaker bottles, and they dissolve, so we drink a lot of it. It can go on and can go on. And, if you look at glutathione, it's an amazing molecule. Glutathione is really the fuel for the mitochondria, the brains and the energy source of the cell. How any doctor would say that couldn't be helpful for everyone. Everyone who's, from a person who's a super athlete to a person who's dying of a disease, these are fundamentally important nutrients. It's not 1850. We know these things are available. And in my opinion, why not use them? I'm a traditionalist who's very open-minded to cutting-edge science. I think we should have a big moving feast, as Hemingway discussed it at one point, that the table is always set. We're adding things to the table and taking things off the table, learning and growing and developing. And to bar this from people's lifestyle programs is unfortunate. That's all I can say.
So many people have gained weight now since COVID happened, and so their circulation is really poor. CoQ10 is something that we use a lot, which is naturally in a lot of foods too, but taking extra really has helped them. So it's kind of an epidemic now with high cholesterol, with people taking medication, high blood pressure, which wipes out the natural CoQ10.
We take something called Circulation Max, which actually has your body begin to reproduce or produce, nitric oxide, which is essential for elasticity within the ventricle systems of the body, for better memory, better heart, and most important, libido. Most important. I mean, to not take all of this into account, it's heartbreaking to me. If you purport you're a healthcare professional, let's say that. If you're just an average guy or gal, hey, it doesn't matter. But if you're sitting in front of people and saying, I'm doing my maximum best to help you recover from a disease or prevent premature aging, not using these tools with proper food-based supplements is, to me, a horrible thing.
You mentioned in that, I'm sorry, Will, did you want to say something? Okay. You mentioned in that list CBD oil.
Right.
Is that something that you feel should be included in our regular, there's tons of hype about it. I was not aware that's part of your recommendations. Is that something that you recommend that everyone has?
Anna Marie and I have been taking CBD oil for 10 years. And so if you see the research on it, it's amazing. And we have high intensity, passionate work that we do. This isn't work. I shouldn't even call it work. Mission, fun mission. That's all I can say. And what I saw when I began to consume a proper form of CBD oil, and I went and had meetings with the world's leading authority in Israel, Dr. Nuriat Bernstein, and part of our online program is America's leading authority, Dr. Jacobus out of the University of Houston. And I went out to University of California, Los Angeles, and met the Robertsons and the laboratory people that were working there. And so when I dive into these things, I'm not reading it in Reader's Digest. I'm literally going to the people, shaking them down in the New York way that I am, and basically seeing if they're lying, if they skip a beat, if they don't look me in the eye. And once I trust that what they're talking about is real, then I employ it. And I saw a different level of balance happened in my life, and I'll let Anna speak for her, herself. But the reality is it has a different way of creating levity in the way I think.
Yeah, it's been amazing here, of course, to see how people, it helps people relax. And especially now in the last year that people have so much more anxiety and stress from anything from finance to just taking care of themselves as best as they can. It's been great because you have cannabinoid receptors all throughout your body. So it's absolutely a thing that it's totally natural for you to take.
Every doctor, be it holistic or alternative doctor or not, needs to do a service to your patients. Study the Hebrew University 1961 report on cannabinoid receptor sites that activate immune system cells. I was sitting here at the research center of Israel. I mean, you talk about an impressive place. It's thousands and thousands of acres with Nuriat Bernstein, the world's leading authority on cannabinoid research. And she's showing me a product they made that reverses tumors in the brain. How could you avoid learning about that? I mean, I can tell you something. Our medical team here, we're not a rehab institute, but people who have gone through rehab institutes and have come here to come off everything from cigarettes to alcohol. They've done the original work and they come here. I can't do it nearly as well without CBD oil.
I just want to mention to everyone in the audience that the Real Truth About Health conference sells 0 products. We have no advertisers. We have no sponsors. We have no commission arrangement with anyone. We don't get any, we have no affiliate arrangements. We are completely trying to find out information for our own use and just so everyone is aware of that. In terms of wheatgrass, I don't like the way it tastes. I hold my nose when I drink it, and I'd rather not have it. Are you saying that grasses, wheatgrass or oatgrass, is something that we should really try to incorporate in our lives? Or if we're saying we're eating sprouts already, we're eating salads, we're eating a lot of, taking supplements, do we really need to incorporate grasses such as wheatgrass in our daily life?
Well, let me rephrase your question in a way that all the listeners all over the world may understand it. If I said to you, I'm going to give you $5 or I'm going to give you $1, which one is everyone going to choose? You're going to choose the $5. So when you have an opportunity to take something that's so beneficial, and let me tell you, Anna Marie and I drink it every day and have since we were children in our 20s. Literally, we don't love the taste of it either, but we know how good it is and we observe how good it is. So how it works, let's make it science rather than opinion and is it good or bad. So in your body, you have this wonderful thing called hemoglobin, which is actually the engine behind red blood cells. And what makes hemoglobin is these little compartmental hems, H-E-M-E-S, excuse me. And the truth of the matter is when you're taking this chlorophyll-rich grass, or by the way, any raw plant-based chlorophyll, it's all identical, chlorophyll is chlorophyll, you're virtually injecting your body with new blood. So when I'm dealing with people here who are really healthy, and I can supercharge their blood, it's like putting some kind of a jet fuel into their body. When I'm having people who are half dead because they've just been through 2 years of chemotherapy or 20 years of antibiotics or psychiatric medicine their psychiatrist finally took them off of, I need to get them to average levels of energy. And I can't tell you any quicker way to do it than shots of wheatgrass. Now, as distasteful as it is to a part of the population, now there are people that come here that Anna Marie and I want to canonize that love wheatgrass. We're not one of them. We drink it every day, but we don't love wheatgrass. We love green drinks. And the reality is these people love it. They're shooting it down left and right. Do you have more, et cetera? And I'm not sure why, but I can tell you this, they're smart to do that. Now, let me say this to you. What we know scientifically about the grasses, grasses were the first life form when soil emerged from the ocean. The very first life form was algae. That's why we take 5 a day. And the second life form were sea algae, arami, dulse, haziki, kelp, et cetera, et cetera. And then when land came, the first thing that grew on land, it morphed from algae, was grass. So the core of the Hippocrates diet and lifestyle are the #1 life form, the #2 life form, and the #3 life form. Do you need anything else? Not really. But do we give organic vegetables to people? Sure. They're familiar with that. Most people don't know what invisible algae is or haven't eaten sea algae unless you're Asian. And nobody thinks about grass unless you're an elite military member in Israel or in the Green Beret or the Navy SEALs, because every one of the elite military worldwide are told you can live indefinitely on grasses. So that's what they tell them. Eat grasses, you'll live indefinitely. Why? Because it has everything in it you need. So I drink it, shoot it down with green drinks, and I'm happy with that.
Well, you feel the life force and the energy you get out of it is so worth drinking it. So if anybody who's listening has never tried it, you try it. You start with 1 ounce and then slowly go up to 2 ounces. And what we drink is 2 ounces twice a day.
Yeah, and 2 ounces, by the way, is equivalent if you went to a garden and picked fresh, green, organic vegetables and just 5 pounds of it, ate 5 pounds of it. That's what 2 ounces is. So is it good everyone take it? Sure.
Okay.
What about you, Dr. Tuttle? You love wheatgrass?
Actually, you know, I'm one of those people that really likes it.
Boy, we're going to canonize you.
Well, I know a lot of people, they have to have the wheatgrass juice and immediately have something else following it, a chaser of some kind. And I've heard different things, cinnamon and different things people take to get it down. But I think, I have to say, you know, it's absolutely true what you're saying. It's an amazing, wonderful feeling to drink wheatgrass juice. And of course, a lot of people at home, it's a little harder. What we've done here sometimes is you can buy wheatgrass like at one of the local health food stores, and it's good to have a good juicer that'll do, you know, heavy duty juicer in your kitchen that'll handle that. So you can make it fresh. So it's a little bit of a, you know, of an investment in if you're at home to make this yourself. And it's best if it's fresh. You know, if you buy it, it's already a little bit over the hill, I would think. But if you can, I think really it's true. I mean, like if you, especially for people who really need healing of some kind, there's nothing better than this that I can.
Yeah, what's amazing to me, it's remained one of the most popular health foods ever since the 1970s. And there's at least half the population that really doesn't love the taste of it. And so just think of that.
Right.
The benefits outweigh the taste. Yes.
Yeah, big time, big time.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you an important question. There are people that really are followers of all of you and appreciate and read your books. And there are people on this call who barely know who you are, haven't read your books. They eat their regular diet. They're very happy with their diet. They're not looking to change. They like chicken. They like fish. They like what they eat. They're trying, their best, but they're not really being sold. Like if you say, do you want to smoke cigarettes? A lot of them would say, well, no, the negatives outweigh the benefits. I'm not going to smoke cigarettes. But a lot of people are saying, I don't really know what the negatives are. Now, let's leave the environmental discussion out and let's leave the animal cruelty discussion out. For people who are just saying, look, I don't really get it. Like, why? What's in it? What's the benefit? I'm totally okay with my chicken parmesan and whatever I'm eating. So the real question is not just very direct science on the question of obesity, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer. Not the theory. What are you saying is going to be different in their life? And the two questions are, maybe Will, you can answer one and Brian the other and Anna Marie the other. So one question is, if they switch to a whole food plant-based diet, what happens compared to their current diet on heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, osteoporosis, all these things? And then the same question for a whole food plant-based raw diet. So again, these people aren't necessarily looking for inspiration or motivation. They're fine. They just don't know exactly what the science says. They want to live a long, healthy life. And if they think they're going to live it eating what they are, they're not going to change. So there's three options. One, continue eating their normal diet and assume it's not a terrible standard American diet. Assume they've given up soda and sugar, but they eat animal products as a regular part. The second is someone switches to a whole food plant-based diet. And the third is someone switches to a whole food raw diet. What specifically should they expect different in these three scenarios on each of these diseases as specifically as you can, so someone could evaluate if they want to put the effort?
Dr. Tuttle, you start.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think essentially when someone is eating the diet you're talking about, which people think is a sort of a healthy diet.
Dr. Tuttle, can you make your microphone a little louder?
Yeah. Okay. When they're eating what they think is a healthy diet, I think, we don't really, the average person in the United States is on, I forget the number, but it's like by the time they're in their 60s, they're on, maybe at least half a dozen or a dozen medications for various things. And that's considered to be pretty healthy, So I think we have to understand that the bar right now in many ways is pretty low. People really, a lot of people have no idea what radiant health is, what if the sense of being filled with energy and exuberant and not being sick or going to the doctor. And I'm so grateful. Back in my 20s, I became a vegan, and in the early days, I somehow learned to stay away from processed foods as well. And I have to say, I remember really, quite honestly, I haven't been to the doctor for my health really since I was in college, which was back in the early 70s. And so it's been like 50 years. And so to be able to go 50 years without health insurance, without going to a drugstore, without buying Right Guard and Rolaids and Alka-Seltzer and aspirin, and I don't even know what these things are, what they do, all these different things that people, Viagra, whatever people think they need, it's there's a tremendous. I mean, that's you can't put a price on that. That old saying that the greatest wealth is your health. It really is. I mean, it's a foundation for everything else. Like Albert Schweitzer said, the key to happiness is good health and a short memory. And good health and a short memory go together. But a short memory is being present, which is very important to be healthy, but also the right nutrition. And So moving to a plant-based way of eating, it does so many things at once. Basically you're going from eating high on the food chain. Anyone eating any animal food, you're eating high on the food chain. Toxins concentrate as you go up the food chain. So all the heavy metals, PCBs, dioxin, nuclear radiation, pesticide, herbicide, fungicide residues, all the over 80,000 different toxic chemicals that concentrate in the earth or the soil, the water, the air, it ends up in animal-based foods. All these animals, most people don't realize that cows and pigs and chickens are being fed fish to fatten them up and to make them give more milk and more eggs. So fish concentrate heavy metals and dioxin, PCBs, and all kinds of stuff. And so it's concentrating so much in these foods. So it's basically the concentration of toxins. I would say that's the big thing. So eating an organic, whole food, plant-based way of eating, we're cutting the toxin load on a massive scale. And we live in a society that does not really tell us. I just read an article like right before this this call that scientists are discovering that the amount of toxic chemicals in people's bodies has been really underestimated. Scientists have really underestimated the amount of toxins in people's bodies and the impact that it's actually having. And that's understandable, because if you tell people how many toxins are in their bodies from chemicals, then the chemical industries are going to be responsible. But we don't want, the chemical industries and the banks in the background, they don't want to be responsible. The drug industries, they want everybody to think that the problem is not chemicals, the problem is viruses and bacteria, because then we can have drugs, we can have vaccines and drugs to go against those. Well, that's good, right? And that just makes more money for the chemical industries, more money for the pharmaceutical industries, more money for the bankers in the background. Everybody's happy, but our health goes down, 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 and we don't get the truth. That's why this is so important, I think, to have this kind of a forum where we can question where the information is coming from. So animal-based foods concentrate these toxins that are in the environment, that are put into the environment purposefully to basically switch the foundation of our agriculture from soil to oil. That's what's happened. And so the soil is dead, the microorganisms are dead, people are eating animal-based foods and these animals are being fed genetically engineered corn and soy and alfalfa and other feed grains that are absolutely toxic in the amount of pesticides and herbicides that are dumped on them. And all of that ends up in the flesh and these animals, concentrates in them, especially in the fat. And then people love the fat, of course, and the dairy and the cheese and the eggs. It all concentrates. So that's number one. Number two, there's over 10,000 different chemicals and hormones and antibiotics that have been approved to be used on the animals themselves. So these animals are sitting on farms and they're getting injected, force vaccinated. They don't have a choice, right? They're getting injected with all kinds of toxins. There's now it's up to 90% of all the antibiotics used in the United States are put onto these animals. So all these antibiotic residues, there's a whole slew of different hormones that are forced on these animals to make them grow faster, give more milk, get pregnant earlier, all kinds of things that are given to these animals, stress hormones, anti-stress hormones, all of that stuff. So all of these residues are ending up in the food, and then the poor people themselves eat this stuff, and then they get drugged by the doctors, right? So they need medications for their diabetes and for their high blood pressure and cancer, all these things. So all these toxins have huge effects on us. Our bodies are trying to cleanse toxins. That's what our bodies do. That's the main thing they're doing. And so we have an allopathic system in place that profits off of this. You have to really understand this. The money runs perfectly for this. And my father owned a whole chain of newspapers, so I understand how the media works. My father, I grew up sitting around the table. I learned, he would talk about this with my mother, that, well, we can't run that article because the so-and-so, the advertiser, wouldn't like that. So we're not going to run that article. So this is how it is. And the news that we're getting, the mainstream media, all of our sources, you can't get anything in the mainstream media that the big advertisers don't want you to hear. And who are the biggest advertisers? The fast food industries, the chemical industry, the drug industries, the bankers in the background, the petroleum industries that are behind all this too. So we have to get our information somewhere else. And a lot of it we have to get from our intuition, from our inner wisdom. And also by listening to people like the people who are running Hippocrates Health Institute, for example. It's probably the cutting edge leading alternative health care center in the United States, maybe in the world, where people are actually having tremendous success. And I think we can, each one of us in the laboratory of our own experience, discover that there's a huge difference between getting through the day and really being healthy. It's kind of like, if you're wearing shoes all the time and they're too small, but you get used to it. You don't realize it. And then one day you take those shoes off. It's like, woohoo, man. Now it's like, I can dance, I can jump. I feel so great. Yeah, I never realized it. I just never knew. My shoes were too tight and I was kind of hobbling around here and I got used to it. We get used to having lousy health pretty much. Most people around us, they all do that, right? We're not that healthy as a society. And so people get used to that kind of everybody's overweight. Someone who's really radiantly healthy and alive is usually not that often seen. So I think the whole idea is to question all the official narratives in a society and move away from dead, toxified foods, what passes for food in most of the grocery stores. And I would say 95% of it, when I go into a store, there's no food in there, except for maybe a little bit at the edges. Most of it you can't buy. It's not food. I would never even consider it food. But then I'm behind people at the checkout and they're actually eating this stuff, and I want to shake them in a way and say, don't you realize what you're doing? But it's the problem is we're all brainwashed. A better word I think is brain poisoned by the mainstream media and by the medical establishment that is controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. And so we have to take responsibility ourselves for our own health and question these things and move to an organic, whole food, as much as possible, local, plant-based way of eating. And definitely most of it, I would say, uncooked. I mean, that's really, that's very important to have living foods that are fresh and alive. I mean, this is a foundation for fantastic health, and everyone can work and try it for themselves, especially with guidance like we're getting here, I think, from everybody here today.
So if you don't care, let's say, to be selfish, let's say we don't care about the cruelty, the unbelievable cruelty, the rape, the murder that's going on in farms, especially for farm animals that have nobody to look after them. FDA, EPA, APCA, nobody looks after them. They're totally on their own. But let's say one word, microbiome. So microbiome is your environment. That's your flora. That is so important because 70% of your whole immune system, your T cells are made in the lining of your gut. And 90% of your serotonin is made there. You eat meat, you mess it up. You eat chicken, you eat eggs, you have dairy products. You have a saturated, filthy place of parasites, fungus, mold, bacteria, and virus. And that's what feeds every disease.
And there's no such thing as organic. I write about that in several of my books, Dairy Deception, Killer Fish, Poison Poultry. The whole sham for yuppies, organic foods, this is a criminal act. That's all I can say. So now to answer specifically your question, Stephen, you said, look at the diet that's moderately good compared to what smoking and drinking every day and eating McDonald's, and then a cooked vegan diet that many of the people you invite to Real Truth as authorities advocate, and then the living food diet, which is the one that was given birth with lifestyle medicine here at Hippocrates. And let's start by saying, how many of you would like a 4-time greater chance for reaching 80 years old after 50? I think everyone would say yes. If I'm 50, I would really at least like to be 80. Well, just eliminate meats, the ones Anna Maria just mentioned. That's red meat, pork, chicken, turkey, and add in an unborn meat there called eggs. And we know statistically from a wonderful study that was done That's what's going to be achieved. A 4-time greater chance to reach 80 years old if you give up these flesh-based and dairy foods. Number 2, a study came out of Brigham's University in Utah that looked at the DNA of chicken and looked at cancer in the breast. And the very DNA of the chicken people consumed were in the cancer tumors. So this is a done deal. This is no longer, well, we're not sure, we need more research. Baloney, 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 and don't eat that either. This is real stuff that we're talking about. Look at the World Health Organization that talked about the dramatic increase in colorectal cancer from eating meats. And they were very conservative on this. They said you had a 15% higher chance if you ate, listen to this, 1 meal of meat a week. Now, who the heck does that? My entire diet was meat at one point. 1 meal of meat a week. 1 meal of meat, you have 15% higher chance of getting cancer. Now, if you add bacon in there, it's even worse. So what we call the treated meats, the lunch meats, the salami, bologna, kibasi, cured ham, whatever these things are, this dramatically multiplies the chances of numbers of forms of cancer. This is research we're giving you out of the highest levels of research institutes on the planet Earth. And why we don't talk about this, we don't know. Well, Will Tuttle just told us because he came from a family that was in the media. And he was a little boy in Massachusetts. He heard his dad say 50 years ago, 60 years ago, we can't put that article in there because our advertisers will not stick with us. You don't think that's going on with national and international TV? Of course it is. You guys are being conned. Now, let's go back to 1917. That was more than 100 years ago. That was the very first year that the meat and dairy industry started to bankroll academic books. So they went to scholastics and said, you're struggling, you don't have money, we love children, we want them to have education, and we'll pay for a big percentage of these books, providing you let us add the nutritional components in. Now, these are academics. They knew nothing about nutrition. So they started to hijack it. They took the 12 food group, which 1 was meat and dairy. Then it became 1 was meat, 1 was dairy, and just for the hell of it, they threw vegetables and fruit in. The reality that happened 105 years ago. That's what we're talking about. So you and I as little girls and little boys, and Anna Marie and I getting our doctorate degree in nutritional science, we're PhD nutritionists, had that same propaganda in the books from kindergarten through doctoral programs. That's why you believe this. Then to top it all off, if you were lucky like both of us, we had parents that loved us. They were good people. But boy, they were Attila the Hun and Jack the Ripper when it came to food. And I can tell you, my mother taught me one thing as a boy. Love meant food. If I love you, I give you food. If you love me, you eat the food. It's an unspoken international conversation we're having. So my mother, who loved me and I trusted, and on my developmental years, here I'm a little boy, the first 6 years of life, you develop 85% of your personality. Listen, people, my mother told me meat was good for me. Then I went to school, and at 6 years old and 7 years old and 8 years old, my teacher told me my masculinity, my malehood, my machiavellism depended upon me eating the flesh of an animal. Then I watched movies. And in those movies, I saw cavemen. I used to pretend to be a caveman. And I would take the leg of a chicken. Boy, those big legs around Thanksgiving with the turkey. And I'd eat them because I wanted to be a man. I wanted to be masculine. So all of this propaganda went on. And what's ironic is the more meat you eat, the more feminine you are, because they inject those things with female hormones to fatten them up. What's ironic, the more milk you eat, the more osteoporosis and arthritis you'll get. Read the work of Dr. Campbell. the most important work ever done in the field of nutritional science, published as a scientific document in 1990, the China study. Who's going to argue with that other than egghead intellectuals who know nothing from nothing? He actually went around, did data and statistics around the world. In the countries where people ate more meat and more dairy, more cancer, more heart attacks, more strokes, more diabetes. In the countries that eat the least, they had practically or virtually none of them. When I go out and I speak at medical conferences, I leave this for the slow-minded, only the doctors, because the rest of you get this stuff. And I actually do an inverted pyramid. And at the very bottom of that tip of the pyramid are countries that eat plant-based diets. They have no cancers to speak about. At the very top, now we get to the big countries: United States, Europe, Australia, Argentina. That's where the largest amount of cancers are. People, this is no longer debatable. You're just looking for somebody that's going to tell you what you want. I'm telling you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. You want science? You're going to have to extend this program for the next 10 years, and Anna Marie and I will sit here and give you science study after science study after science study. And if, by the way, you're really interested in this, I write book for you eggheads. It's called Food is Medicine. It's a 3-volume academic series just for people who like to doubt truth. And in there, I document study after study from the highest universities and the highest laboratories on the planet Earth. Now, if that's not enough, it's because you have two things going on. You're addicted to it. You're not having a value-driven lifestyle with integrity, where you say, even though I like the taste of it, even though I know it's bad for me, I don't have the guts to change it. And number 3, it's much easier to go along with everyone else than to stand out. But the good news is, really good news, the young people today, here and in Europe, and in Israel even more, 50% of them aspire to be plant-based eaters. That's remarkable to me. So 50% of the youngest people who are adults today say, I want to be a vegan. That's a good news. And those of you that aren't really thinking openly and widely about this kind of transformation into the world that we need to move into, not only to save your butt, but to save the butt of the planet Earth and all the creatures that we kill unnecessarily, you're going to be left behind. The train's going, we're all on the train, and by the way, it's a nice ride. It's very scenic.
Thank you, Brian. You know, I just want to add maybe one thing. There's a saying in many, I think, I know it's in the Dhammapada, the Buddhist tradition. I think it's a truism or truth, a spiritual truth in many spiritual traditions. And it's basically that if a person hears that they can have a higher pleasure or higher well-being by giving up a lower pleasure, then as a wise person, they would do that. And I think this is really, in many ways, what it comes down to. There's certain levels of pleasure, I think, like being comfortable, going along, eating what everybody else eats, having comfortable food, and people think that that's a pleasure that they don't want to give up, and don't realize that there's this high. It really is a certain type of pleasure. Pleasure is not really the right word, but a higher pleasure or higher well-being. That, I mean, like for me, the idea of eating meat or or dairy or any of these things, like smoking or drinking or whatever, it's like it would be such a come down. And I think the idea is that we are here on this earth to evolve in our understanding and to help work together to build a world of harmony and peace and justice and freedom and creativity and joy and celebration. And so all of our choices in our daily lives, I think, as Brian and Anna Marie are saying, we have these values, to have our values be aligned with our actions. And so if I'm eating foods that come from misery, and there's no way, I mean, we all know that if I'm eating the flesh of an animal, wherever it came from, a being was killed. So not only are there these physical toxins that I was talking about and we've been talking about the concentrated toxins that the animals was eating and drinking and breathing, all of that, and also the whatever drugs and hormones they were given. But there are also what I refer to in the World Peace Diet as metaphysical toxins we're eating. And I think this is maybe the worst in some ways because we're eating terror and fear and despair and anxiety and frustration and misery. And how can we expect to build a temple? And our body, in many ways, is a temple for the spirit, a temple for our beautiful consciousness. We're here functioning through our physical body. And you would think, I think our intuition knows this, that we would be very, in a sense, right? If we're building it, you're building every day this temple, this vehicle to use bricks that are of the quality that you'd like to use to have a beautiful, powerful, creative vehicle to use. So why would we ever this temple misery and horror and pain and suffering? That is completely contrary to our natural wisdom. The only way we do it is that we suppress our intelligence. I think that's the main problem that happens in our society, our institutions. I think especially the educational, I have a PhD in education. I mean, our educational system in many ways is designed, unfortunately, to reduce our intelligence. The basic rituals in our society, eating animal foods, it reduces our intelligence. Intelligence is the capacity to make relevant connections. But if I'm eating meat, like we're saying, oh, we're taught, oh, it's a good food. We're good people. We like to eat a good steak and have a milkshake. And we create this disconnect, right? We just disconnect from the animal and the suffering, and we stay shallow, and we don't want to make the connections. But intelligence is the capacity to make relevant connections. So as a society and as individuals, we are, with every meal, if we're eating animal foods, we're reducing our actual, not only our cognitive intelligence, but our emotional intelligence, our ability to feel compassion and empathy. We just learn to glaze over our eyes and go numb. And we see the cows in the field and we think, well, I don't care about them. We think about the chickens and the pigs that we're eating. Well, I don't care about them. We think about the people that are starving because most of the food we're growing, we're feeding to these animals while people are going hungry. Well, I don't care about them. And we think about the indigenous people who are being destroyed and we don't care about them. We think about the slaughterhouse workers who have to stab animals all day and have the highest rates of injury. Oh, I don't care about them. And pretty soon we don't care about even ourselves, right? I think that's the big problem. We don't care about ourselves enough and about others around us. So what we're talking about really is not only a nutritional transformation, but I think really a spiritual and psychological and cultural transformation to care about others and about ourselves, and then to see with new eyes, to see that we're all interconnected and that when we create a foundation of foods that we're eating and see that nutrition is not reductionistic. Our whole science is based on reducing everything. It's based on materialism, that consciousness doesn't matter, that we're just, when a baby is born, when a sperm and egg come together, then it's just these cells that sort of randomly connected. And then these cells are multiplying. And then pretty soon, just because of DNA, they make some kind of little meaningless organism, this little body that now has to just try to he's just going to try to compete with others and pass on his genes. And it's all meaningless in a meaningless universe. I mean, this is the kind of toxic narrative. It's the background of our entire society. And we have to question all of this reductionism, because we reduce animals to objects. Pretty soon we reduce our food science to just this reductionistic looking at vitamins and minerals. And we don't see the whole symphony of life and our harmony with nature and our connection with animals and the earth and the beauty. And this is what I think really brings health, when we rediscover the deeper truths of our being and see our connection with life. And then we don't want that lower pleasure. We see there's a much higher pleasure of feeling wonderful about the fact that we're in this beautiful planet. We're doing the best we can to contribute to the solutions that are here. We're doing the best we can to be kind and loving to other beings, especially those who are vulnerable. Our life has meaning and a purpose. I mean, this kind of a pleasure, it's like infinitely beyond the pleasure of like, wow, I just like the taste of cheese or whatever. I mean, it's like, you can't even, nauseatingly ridiculous
I know.
to try to compare those. And I think we have to waken out of this cultural trance where we've lost track of what it is to be a human being and be part of a benevolent unfoldment of life here and begin to exemplify that more in our own
It's
life.
a good segue to answer the last part of the question. So what differentiates the moderate animal-based diet and the plant-based cooked diet and now the living diet? What Dr. Tuttle just explained to you is, in a scientific way, photomic. So you have photons that come from these plants, if they're unprocessed, uncooked, that bring literal light and energy into the human cells. And they are the foundational fuel to develop consciousness. And consciousness is not something within us, it's something we connect to. So to have living plants, the diet that we were meant to eat, there's no doubt in any serious anthropological mind today, in the beginning of the 21st century, that we were plant eaters. We were not hunters and gatherers. That was a false scenario come up with in Oxford back in the 19th century. And now the relevant research that's been done today has proven that on a biological basis. But more important, and I do agree totally with Dr. Tuttle, is we've got to allow ourselves to be liberated from the pain and suffering of our own inherent patterns of deception. That we have literally created false paper tagger lives. And we don't feel good, and we're confused. And we just have no relations with other people that's deep and authentic and honest. And it's time that we stop that and we leave behind the fear and we start to trust ourselves and trust others and realize everything can be perfectly fine. But the act of stopping murderous activity is the number one thing we must do. To abuse anyone to gain benefit is a crime as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
If we abuse a human being, and there's plenty of that going on, believe me. We have more slavery today as we speak than we've ever had in the history of humanity. We have more sex slavery than we've ever had in the history of humanity. We have more racism than we've ever had in the history of humanity. And it's time that we have love and we have peace and we have a planet that we cherish, a mother that we respect. She's given us life. If you believe in God, and many of you purport you do, I just don't believe it, frankly. You have to resonate with these things. You were given everything you need, and we're just abusing it. And we're abusing the greatest gift, your life. By self-abuse, you're spitting in the face of the universe and God. And it's unnecessary. I've had the privilege my whole life to watch the liberation of people. The entire mission statement of Hippocrates Health Institute is liberate humans and the environment. That's all we do here, is liberate you from your own patterns of deception. And when you do that, we, all as a human race, will liberate the environment to once again get back to the paradisical ideology that God gave us.
And we pay a huge price. We pay with our body, of course, on a meat diet. I need doctors, I need pharmaceutics, I need surgeries. I lose my gallbladder, I lose my appendix, I might lose the breast, I might lose my ovary, I might lose my prostate. We just keep cutting. For what? When these are things that comes from a meat, fish, chicken, dairy, egg diet. It's very, very, very much so.
So don't just stand where you are and say, this is an interesting conversation. Dr. Tuttle and Anna and I are not saying we're elitist and we're better than you. We're you. We came from exactly where you're from. We did exactly what you did. And we're humbled by the fact that you're listening to us. So all of us and many more open our arms and welcome you to the human race of the 21st century. I'm an optimist. I think we're well on our way. I think everything's going to be fine. We're just going through turmoil at this point because too many of you are lost without values. Gain the values by acting in a way with integrity and humility.
So when
Can I just say one quick thing? I think one important aspect here, and it's so great to share these ideas, is to feel into, again, this ancient spiritual teaching. I refer to it in the World Peace Diet as the boomerang effect. Whatever we sow, we reap.
Mhm.
And when you think about the animals that we're eating, if we're eating animal-based foods, these animals are forced into situations that we would not want to be forced into, and they're actually having the same diseases that we're getting. Like we sow the seeds. For example, we have this obesity epidemic, right? Yeah, there's no matter what we do, if you look at the graphs of obesity over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it's always going up. It just keeps going up and up and up and up. So what are we doing? So we have that problem. What are we doing? We have literally billions of animals who we have confined for one purpose. They're sold by the pound. We want to make them as obese as possible, as quickly as possible. We have whole armies of scientists and researchers that study lighting schedules and breeding practices and feeds, how to feed, and drugs and hormones and all kinds of things to just get these animals as fat as possible, as quickly as possible, because that's where the money is. And so we sow the seeds of obesity in billions of animals, and we think in our delusion that we're going to not have obesity, right? We're causing obesity. As you sow, so shall you reap. The same thing with, like, for example, osteoporosis. We have this situation. Some of you have seen this in maybe some of the undercover videos, but we're constantly sowing osteoporosis seeds of that, especially in dairy cows, pushed to give much more milk than they normally would. And so these poor animals are pregnant and lactating simultaneously. They're giving, up to 100 pounds of milk a day when they normally would only give it the most, maybe 20 or 25 pounds of milk a day. So calcium is being leached from their bodies on a massive scale. And these cows have severe osteoporosis. Many of them, when they get to the slaughterhouse, when they're only 5 years old, they're sent off to slaughter, even though they would normally live to be 25 years. And very often they become downers. It happens all the time. Their bones just break because they have such severe osteoporosis. So they're being pushed by these forklifts into the slaughter line. It's terrible. And chickens also, their bones them all the time because they're forced to overproduce eggs. So all the calcium, there's a lot of calcium in eggshells. So they, again, have severe osteoporosis. So we're forcing osteoporosis on billions of animals, and we get an osteoporosis epidemic. We force cancer. I mean, these animals are living in the most toxic environments you can imagine. They're eating toxic food. They're under incredible stress. They're literally driven into insanity, banging their heads against the bars. And we're eating cancer. They cut the tumors off the flesh. They're supposed to, but there's all kinds of cancer in the flesh that we're eating. And we find a cancer epidemic, and we force these animals into terrible psychological conditions. And we find, again, the biggest profits that the pharmaceutical industry makes are for pharmaceutical products, drugs, for people with the same things we're inflicting on the animals: chronic pain, chronic despair, insomnia, depression, stress. This is what we force billions of animals into. Why do we think we're not going to have the same thing happening to us? This is the basic thing we have to understand, is that we live on a beautiful, abundant planet. We can feed everyone on a fraction of the land if we would merely sow the seeds that we would like to reap ourselves. If we want to be free and healthy, we can be free and healthy. But if we sow the seeds of slavery and misery and disease in billions of animals who don't want to be enslaved, who don't want to be unhealthy, who do not want to have their babies stolen, who do not want to have their families destroyed, what's going to happen? We're going to find war and terrorism and destruction of our families and being force medicated ourselves like we do to the animals. So we're at a point now where it's really critical for us to waken out of the fact that this is an obsolete system that we've been born into. We don't have to blame ourselves. We have to just see this and understand it and let it go, right? Not cooperate with it. And realize the other thing I just wanted to mention is that we've talked about these different toxins, but just to say that organic meat, organic dairy, organic eggs, maybe they don't have as many toxins, but there are inherent toxins. For example, dairy, the main protein in dairy is casein. And casein is a huge, gigantic protein molecule that we don't have renin, which is the enzyme that breaks down casein like little calves have. We don't have that. So anyone eating dairy products, especially cheese, which has a lot of casein, and yogurt and so forth, we're getting a molecule that we don't have the enzyme to break down. It wreaks havoc. We're not little calves. We should not be eating this. And even the basic proteins in meat, for example, they're very large proteins. So a lot of people think, well, I'm eating meat and dairy, I'm getting good high quality protein. We have to realize that we're not designed to eat those kind of large, complex molecules that are difficult to break down. Plant-based proteins are much easier for us to break down into the essential amino acids that we can recombine to create the hundreds of thousands of different proteins that we need to create to be healthy. So plant-based protein is much higher quality. Plant-based fatty acids are much higher quality. Plant-based, fiber and carbohydrates, all these things. Animal-based foods, even if somehow they could be lovingly done or whatever, which they can't, they're still inherently toxic. They're inherently not what we're designed for. So it's very important to see these different levels and see the bigger picture on every level, that when we move away from violence, when we move away from animal-based foods, on every level, we're reducing the variety of toxins and we're embracing an exemplary way of positive. It's a really profound misunderstanding that our society labors under, and it's amazing that it continues. That's the real question. And why does it keep continuing? Why are we, as rational beings, still hanging on to something that's so profoundly, obviously irrational? And I think that's where what Dr. Brian and Anna Marie are talking about, that there's a certain type of addiction that perhaps goes, and also the idea that these kinds of food give us love because that's what our mother did, and we want to fit in, and we want to just comply and go along and eat what we've always eaten. So to just take time to look deeply and realize that we are responsible for our food choices, and as we sow, so shall we reap. That's the underlying teaching here too.
Before we go to the next question, Dr. Wilcox out of Harvard University said it beautifully. I quote him in one of the presentations I made. He said, we think we got one over on the animal. The animal gets us back. We kill the animal and it literally kills us.
So if someone said to me, what do you think about Brian and Anna Marie Clement and the information they present, I would say, I think it's fantastic. I think they're experts and they have so much great information for people that are dealing with health issues and everything. And if someone said, do you think I should follow them? I'd say, no, I don't think so. I think you should follow Brenda Davis or Joel Furman. And the reason is because no matter how convincing it is to eat sprouts, green juice, and wheatgrass, it really seems like the first step for a person who's not sick is beans. And I don't know how to get anyone to switch from a regular diet to an all salad, sprout, juice diet, even though it might be logically better. I feel like if someone could sum up this whole conference, I would sum it up and eat beans. That's how it seems like you get off animal products, is with beans and maybe whole grains. So I don't want to lose all the people that are sitting at home, all motivated, all psyched up. They just heard Will talk about animals and they really care about this, but they're hungry. They're hungry at lunch. They're hungry at dinner. They eat a salad for 3 days and it's just not, they don't have it all together. So wouldn't the first step for most people who are not in a crisis situation to start switching to beans? Isn't that the protein source that is the answer to get people satiated? Isn't 2 cans of chickpeas with whatever you have to put on it the way to get calm and take the first step?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, we're realists. And so we didn't jump out of a plane without a parachute. So we ate cooked diets to begin with. And I was very exploratory. So I was deeply involved with macrobiotics. I wrote one of Michio Kushi's books for him. I was a strict vegan. Very, very short time was a vegetarian. And one summer just naturally moved into eating all raw food. And the difference was I doubled my health in 3 months. And my consciousness rapidly and radically, permanently shifted. And then I picked up the book that I was ready for at that moment, that was written by Ann Wigmore, who healed herself of stage 4 cancer. Now, let's differentiate. There's some people on this, watching this panel tonight, that are facing major disease. You can't just eat beans and think you're going to get perfectly healthy. The good news is you're giving up the animal-based foods and all of the physical, spiritual, psychological health disorders that they bring on. But maybe you need to do what I did, Anna Maria did, and probably Dr. Tuttle did. I'm speaking for it. You make a slow but sure move in the right direction. Just don't get stuck in the sand. And so, do I think cooked beans have that much protein in it? Any of those authorities that tell you they do, they're not right. So if you sprout a bean and basically cook it, it's going to be much easier to digest. This is why when you're telling the listening audience out there to eat beans, they immediately think of a 3-letter word called gas, because it's almost impossible to break those things down. When you germinate it, it makes it much easier, much more appropriate for you to get the amino acids that are in there. But I'm totally in congruence with you on that one, Stephen.
Okay. Next question. You have mentioned that we should eat sprouts and we should have algae. When you say we should have sea vegetables, you're talking about, I guess, dulse, kombu, nori, hajiki, all the sea vegetables. Is this just a nice, fun thing to maybe throw in a salad now and then? Or is this like a hardcore thing that you're saying is critical that we include in our diet? And are you concerned that seaweed comes from oceans and Fukushima is dumping nuclear wastewater into the oceans, and we're concerned about getting that into our seaweed? So is sea vegetable something that everyone should be making sure is in every salad? Or does it have too much salt? Or does it have ocean contaminants? How does seaweed fit into our diets?
I'll try to break it to several different comments. Number one, a lot of you were conned by not so well-educated doctors to take fish oil because of omega fatty acids, the oleic acids, which are incredibly important for the brain and energy in the physical body. But where the fish get that from are sea algae. So just like you don't get protein from meat, you get it from where the animal gets the protein, from the grasses, the greens, the fresh plants. The same thing with fish oil. When Anna Marie and I were invited to Russia after Chernobyl, and we were asked to speak to many of the victims of Chernobyl and work with them, we strongly advise these people to take sea algae. Sea algae, once again, is a second life form on the planet Earth. This is well before you showed up. And the reality is those sea algae are immune to the heavy metal poisons, including uranium, which is a heavy metal that's permeating most other plants. And it actually inversely takes radioactivity and other heavy metals out of the body. So we don't give people chelation therapy here to get rid of heavy metals. We stick them in infrared saunas and give them copious amounts of algae. So I'm not so worried about the contamination. Now, I wouldn't suggest or advise you go and collect algae off the coast where Fukushima is. But pretty much it's minimal what you find there, and you'll have much more on land-based plants geographically. The last thing I'll say, yes, it would be a wise thing to take, because as advanced thinkers in this field, we don't know everything that's in the algae. It's a primal food. Think of it as the foundation in a 25-story building. And your life is a 25-story building. And within those cells of those primal plants, not only are all the nutrients that we've so far discovered in the last 115 years of nutritional science, that's all it is. As a matter of fact, it didn't become a science until Cornell made it a science in 1928, but I'm going to give it an extra few years because Dr. Fletcher was a man that discovered the first nutrient called B vitamin. And he helped to wipe out beriberi with that vitamin. And he found that in the nutritious part of brown rice. But what I will say to you, what we've learned so far is in all of those primal plants, plus a whole lot more we're yet to discover. Now, we don't all have to know everything we should know before we move forward. As long as you're on the right track, using your intuition, using the knowledge we have, and the science that's available, you're going to make good choices.
And the stress that's on our bodies now, and the lack of nutrition in the soil, iodine is a big deal. And so I definitely suggest kelp and dulse for men and women to make sure that we have enough iodine.
Okay. Also, what about fermented foods? There's a lot of talk about the gut microbiome, and people say have fermented foods like sauerkraut. Is this just like a fun, nice thing, maybe included, or should we be eating raw sauerkraut? And what about the salt that's in it?
Ever since 1956, when we opened the doors, fermented food has been part of Hippocrates' diet. And now when you look at the global research on longevity, every single group, I think except one, rely heavily on fermented food. Every cultural diet on the planet Earth has fermented food in it, be it Asian or be it German, you know. And so recognize that intuitively and inherently, our ancestors got this. Now, am I going to be goofy enough to say that the you get in different ferments are going to equal a well-designed living food probiotic? And the answer is no. But why not do it all? So sauerkraut, raw sauerkraut that only takes 3 days to make in your own home's kitchen is placed out on the table here practically every meal for that very reason.
Okay. Next question. Is reversing early stage cancer with lifestyle easy or hard or impossible? What about late stage cancer, and how would you do it?
First answer is easy. So we very seldom get to see people with early stage cancer because most people have to go through what I jokingly call the monkey show. And the monkey show does their magic that fails all of the time. They never pull the rabbit out of the hat, or rarely pull the rabbit out of the hat. And then after they're almost dead, I get to work with them. And after their immune system has been knocked into the ground from nuclear bombs, I get to work with them. And after they've been to 10 experts who basically gave up on them, I get to work with them. And so when you see early stage cancers, your immune system can easily be built because you haven't destroyed it. And Hippocrates does not heal people. Your immune system heals you. If people watch this year's Real Truth segment that I did, a 2-hour segment, it's called Immune IQ. And I speak about making your immune system intelligent. And in there, it will be very detailed. I can't give a detailed answer here. Why it's important and why it is easy. Moderate for late stage. You have a moderate chance to reverse advanced cancer. By default, Anna Marie and I have worked with thousands. I've worked personally with 175,000 people with advanced cancers. And so It is a moderately easy thing to do. Now, easy may be the wrong word. You know, this isn't taking a Sunday drive to the beach, but it's certainly much more doable than you're led to believe. Let's put it that way. The industry of cancer that has more people working in it than dies from it, and boy, a lot of people die from it, literally tell you that once you have cancer, this is overwhelming, you don't participate. Now they're actually going as far as saying, don't take supplements. They're dangerous to take. And by the way, we're going to give you nuclear bombs that give you cancer, and you should go along with this program. And their own data that comes out of their own medical journals tell us that 93% of the people that are medically treated for cancer and do nothing to improve their lifestyle will eventually have that cancer come back or another cancer and die from cancer. Now, these are the numbers that they're giving you. This is what I've observed. And it's not magic. This is hard work. It all comes down to your immune system, and it's not all food. When I was young and naive, because my field is nutritional science, I used to think if you change the diet, everyone would get well. Now I realize you've got to change your mind. And then people eat the right food, and they have the right relationships, and they do the life work that they should be doing, and they find a job that they love. And guess what? All of that together gives people the ability to heal. Here in our comprehensive cancer program, our entire focus is on what I've just mentioned to you. It is not just diet.
No, the body is overwhelmed, the mind is overwhelmed, and you're just looking for peace. You're looking for something to help you and that you can trust. And you know, there's so much misinformation about cancer out there, and what it is and how it spreads. And now you know, a lot of new information is about how sugar is a big part, meat is a big part, but our mind is just unbelievably big importance in that, because if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I will not heal either.
Yeah. I don't care if it's cancer or a viral disease.
And I think that's one of the things that's most important in healing. Everybody thinks that it's just the food. The food is important, but it's so clear, I think, becoming more and more clear now all the time, that there's at least five other things that are hugely important. One is exercise. I mean, our bodies really get so much more cleansing when we're moving. Flexibility and strength and endurance and so forth. And another huge thing that you've both just mentioned, but I think I just want to underline it, is our relationships. I mean, I think you could be eating like pure 100% organic sprouts and wheatgrass juice and whatever, but if I'm just angry with people and my still won't give up this grudge I have against my father or whatever it is, those kinds of things, our body creates. It's like a pharmacy, right? And our body's creating these all kinds of things that will undermine our health if our relationships are toxic. So to really cultivate loving relationships and take responsibility for the quality of our relationships is, to me, seems like, when we're talking about cancer, is so essential. And then also being creative, having creative outlets and having a purpose for our life. And also connecting with nature, and all these things I know in Hippocrates are emphasized. It's 60 acres of beautiful nature. People can connect with nature, but we can do that. We don't have to be at Hippocrates to do that. We can do that, connecting with nature, connect with our creativity, connect with the purpose of our life. The thing to remember, I think, really is important, is that if I don't have a purpose for my life, then every cell in the body is looking for direction, right? I mean, the heart has to have a reason to be pumping all the time. It's like, why am I pumping all the time? This guy, all he does is sit and watch TV. This is ridiculous. So our cells, if we get up in the morning and we're grateful for another day to learn, to grow, to contribute, our cells are like, all right, let's get to work now. We got to help this guy. We got a purpose here, and so that message is going. And if we don't have that, if it's like, oh, here's another day, I got to go to the work, where I got a meaningless thing, and I dread living. Our cells are just like, what? Why am I doing all this? They're not going to be, and cancer is going to creep in. And we think, unfortunately, we think of bacteria as like our enemies, and I think that's a mistake. Our bacteria really are our friends in many ways. They're the friends of our life. And if there's a lot of death, bacteria just to clean that up. If we're eating a lot of death, if we're thinking thoughts that are not alive, the bacteria are going to try to clean us up and recycle everything. But if we're alive, our bacteria is our friend, and it's just helping us to cleanse. So I think the whole thing really comes down in many ways, as these people really have the experience in this, and that's why it's so inspiring, I think, to see that we can't just deal with the diet. We're working with the entire being, because this reductionistic approach is so endemic in our society, but to really see that it's a transformation of how we see our lives, our relationship with the people in our lives, with animals, with nature, with our purpose, with creativity, with exercise, with our body, with our self-image. That's why this, like, having everybody being afraid of each other, wearing masks, all these things, it just attacks really our health in many ways. And so I think we have to understand these things very clearly and see what's actually happening in the world around us and in our own lives and in our bodies.
When it comes to grains, I said before, beans are like a core item. Whole grains are like the other. So I've heard you in the past say that you recommend of the grains, quinoa, millet, amaranth, teff, buckwheat, and wild rice. And then there are gluten grains like wheat, barley, and oats. And then there's also brown rices. What, for a person who is saying, I'm not ready to be raw, which grains do you recommend? Which whole grains do you recommend they eat? Are there any you recommend they don't eat?
Well, let's repeat the first list that you gave. Amaranth, which is an Aztec and Mayan grain. Now it's more available. Millet, which is a European grain. Quinoa, which is a South and Central American grain. Buckwheat, which is the first crop they ever grew in Europe. Kasha, that's called. Wild rice, because that's not a hybrid rice that has a lot of sugar in it now, carbohydrate in it. So these would be your preference grains there. Teff, an Ethiopian grain, a wonderful grain. And the ones you should try to avoid are the glutinous grains. And in every case, no matter what you're eating, germinate them. It goes from a grain to a plant once you sprout them. And it becomes a totally different biochemical process when you take that. So as an example, we multiply all of the nutrients on an average of 8 times. 8 times more A, 8 times more B's, 8 times more C, 8 times more E. We make it from 17 to 57 times more digestible. And more important, in the gluten grains, they're no longer glutinous. Now, remember what I've said in the past when we're doing our monthly Real Truth question and answer periods, Stephen, that when you recognize that grains are not part of the original human diet, they don't need to be part of what you eat. But we've also been corrupted into, I would never have survived without whole grain breads. I would never have survived without that transitional type of food. And even today, occasionally we'll eat whole grain crackers of some type, and occasionally we'll eat sprouted chickpeas and even cooked sometimes. It's just what Dr. Tuttle, Anna Marie, and I have been saying. And by the way, Anna Marie's name is not up there, just my name. She's not Brian, she doesn't have a beard. That basically most, if not all of your diet when you're fighting a major disease needs to be raw. Once you've healed it, we've done the work when we were still in Boston and we had access to a lot of the labs at the major universities there. Up to 20, even 25% of your diet by weight can be plant-based and cooked so that you see light at the end of the tunnel and you don't compromise the immune system. We also know you go up another 5%, you've now compromised the immune system by 17.8%. You go up another 5% to 35% of your diet is cooked. You've now compromised the immune system 48.2%, one half your immune system. That's what they discovered 100 years ago or 90 years ago at Pasteur Institute with Raskolnikov, where he said this is a problem called leukocytosis, where the body and the immune system, the body has a cooked food in it, the immune system identifies it as a carbon structure and attacks it, compromising the immune system. As the Swedes told us from Anna's country 40 years ago, when you cook one of these plant-based organic foods at a high temperature, there's a cancer-causing element, and that's called acrylamide. And then, as we've known for 69 years now, all of these food-based, raw, plant-based organic foods have oils in them. When you heat an oil 69 years ago, it becomes a problem contributing to heart problems as well as cancers. So there's lots of science on why you shouldn't be eating cooked food. But guess what? I probably wouldn't be here today. Anna wouldn't be here today if we didn't have the whole grains at the beginning. Just go to the ones that we now know about. I didn't know what millet was when I was a kid. Teff, forget it. Most of you don't know what that is now. So just learn the new vocabulary. When you read a book that turns you on, you're turned on. So move into the direction of being turned on by new things, new ideas, new thoughts, and new ways to look at life and food.
What happens with the Institute, because we've been forerunning for so many years of raw living foods, is that, of course, we set it very, very high for everybody, because that's what we know has worked for so many people, of course, that wanted to come and heal. So many people come here nowadays too, just for fitness. They come here to lose weight, they take our fitness program, and they love what they feel. They love what they see. And of course, we teach them that 20% of your diet could easily be the cooked grains, the beans, but we sprout them. And we also teach how to bake or steam squash or root vegetables and make that a part. But you're never going to get the energy that you're looking for unless you add a big part of raw living foods. So,
we have an online culinary institute
yeah,
that we teach some cooked food in there, but how to do it properly. We have a sleep program beginning this spring here. And food is a big part of why people can't sleep well. And so, we look at this in a scientific way through many windows, and the application of a wide variety of technologies, a wide variety of dietary nutritional understandings and science, and a wide variety of ways to conceive and perceive life.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, I think what happened to me was when I first became a vegetarian and then a vegan, I realized, and I was only in my early to mid 20s, but I realized my body needed to detox, and so I did quite a lot of fasting. And I think every year I would fast for a week or or sometimes even longer. Sometimes I do 2 or 3 weeks of fasting. And I think the kind of thing that we're talking about here is it's a good idea to periodically cleanse. Our bodies will accumulate toxins, but we don't have to be doing that all the time necessarily. We don't have to be like always right on top of it, and only, either if we're not fasting, we're only eating raw. It can become really like overwhelming. So I think eating organic and whole foods and mostly raw is not that hard to do. I mean, it's actually delicious, and you can have some starches along with it, and then occasionally, like go to Hippocrates or do it on your own, do a cleanse for a week, or do something really cleansing. And I think if you don't have health issues, you'll feel great. I mean, basically, I think it's It's feeling into your intuitive sense of things. I don't think it's, listening to your body is a little dangerous. It's probably in some ways, if someone's addicted to cigarettes, they don't want to listen to their body, right? So you have to kind of, use your intuition, like your wisdom, and treat your body as not your master, but you're giving like it's a great vehicle, and give it the best fuel. Because you have a purpose. The purpose is the most important thing. We're not here on this earth just to be healthy for no reason. Like, we're here to do something, right?
Look at how healthy I am. You see it? I used to
Right.
smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and the only way I could stop it is gave it up like that. Because people say, well, wean yourself down, forget it. It's dope. You take any dope, you're still a dope addict. I had to quit it immediately. I was shaking for a month or 2.
Wow. Good
Yeah.
for you.
Okay. I guess, Brian, one question, or Will and Anna Maria also, but one question that Hippocrates differs from everyone just about is on fruit. Now, you've said, Brian, that fruit today is picked unripe and it doesn't have as many minerals as it used to. So let's not even ask you the question on fruit. Let's ask the most limited window there is for fruit. In other words, in the summer in July is going to be wild black raspberries and wild blackberries. There's also companies that sell frozen wild, exotic berries, like whatever they're called, all the different types of huckleberries and loganberries and things like that. Also, there are Macintosh apples that are much less sweet. So instead of using fruit as one category where you can considering pineapples and mangoes, would you make your answer gentler and say, look, if you have wild berries that you pick in the summer and you eat a few Macintosh apples that are less sweet, that this is a reasonable part of the diet? Or are you feeling like it's the same thing as cigarettes? Like, in other words, everyone is saying gentle things about fruit, and you've been so strong about it. Is there some room for some soft language to say wild berries seasonally, Macintosh apples or non-sweet apples? Is that in your mindset?
Well, remember the food Nazi on Seinfeld. Now I'm the fruit Nazi. I personally choose to have no fruit in my diet because I see the resulting effect on people who have cancers and viral diseases and bacterial diseases. And I read the work, some of the cutting edge scientists who think way out of the box. They realize there isn't a box, like Thomas Seyfried and others concur with me on this. And right now, as we speak, Johns Hopkins is doing a study including fruit and how it propels the growth and development of metastasis of cancer. So with that said, my personal choice is that. But I'm not a fruit Nazi. Once again, I wouldn't be here today if I didn't eat copious amounts of fruit at the beginning, because raw food was really easy. As a sugar addict, most of my diet was fruit. And most of the people that you're talking about are struggling themselves with elevating and going down that moving feast, as Hemingway discussed about it, and evolving to eat more and more raw food. So for them, they're still in that paradigm where their sugar fix is with fruit. So of course, when you're with a practitioner where that's where they are, they're going to be propelling that into their patients and on the real truth about health and everything else. But I can say to you that fruit today has so much more sugar, 30, 40, 50 times more sugar than the ancestral fruit. That's the problem I have with it. The ripeness is correct. Unripened fruit, as you've even heard a dentist on international TV say, even healthy food can rot the teeth. It's the unripened fruit that's that unhealthy fruit. It's highly acid in the body. Now, on the other hand, as a realist, I basically know I wouldn't be here and people need to get down. So if you're coming off white sugar, is mango a better choice? You bet. If you're coming off beer, is carrot juice a better choice? You bet. And so the list goes on. And I think, it's good for me to sit here 50 years into my lifestyle change and act like I have this down You know, 50 years it took me to get to where I am. And I have some empathy and I have some compassion. And it's not because it should have taken me 50 years. I was at much of an addict. You know, it's that simple. I mean, I had patterns beyond most of your patterns. You know, I really believe my mother. That cake was good for me. And yes, it was organic for a long time, but it was still cake. And so the reality is, yes. And so the wild fruits that you know are ripe because you shake the bush and they come off, you don't pick them and let them turn color and think they're ripe. That's a great choice. Low sugar. And yes, avoid the high sugar, the pineapples and the bananas and, you know, the tropical fruits. And the one I was really stuck on is dried fruit. That was like taking drugs to me. You know, I'd eat like 2 pounds of dried pineapple and I'd get high. And I didn't realize I needed it every day. And when I found Majul dates, I thought I died and went to heaven. You know, so I get it. I get it. So try to get to the lighter ones. If you have cancer, disregard what I've said. If you have chronic fatigue syndrome, HIV, fungal and yeast problems, or low and high blood sugar, avoid what I say right now. And you've got to be on the straight and narrow. That's where I'm a fruit Nazi.
So we serve fruit at the Institute twice a week. And it's a treat for a lot of our guests. And it kind of gives them the right kind of habits. We don't need fruit every day. But it's obviously, if we can buy a local organic fruit, it's number one, because we hopefully will have it ripen, like the apples in the fall, and in the summer we have the blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. Of course, it is for sure. And if you have kids at home, they can have fruit every day.
Yeah, up to 40% of a child's
Yes.
diet can be ripe organic fruit.
Yes.
They metabolize it like little machines.
Okay. Next, how do you fight an infection without antibiotics?
Well, the original antibiotic was called silver. And when Rockefeller came in and got rid of plant-based medicine, herbal medicine, and displaced it with what he made money on, and that's oil-based medicine, and it's now become the number 3 killer in the United States and most developed countries. The only thing that supersedes death by pharmaceutical drugs is death from cancer and death from heart attacks and strokes. So when Rockefeller began that march to the 3rd greatest death in the developed world, he basically did it by giving you something that was dangerous to take. And so to answer your question, that's the premise of why we have problems today.
Yeah, and I think this whole idea, I mean, I think we should, question a lot of the narrative in allopathic medicine about needing antibiotics against these enemies that are all around us. I think a lot of it is somewhat a whole worldview. Like we have the animal agriculture worldview that really is at the core of Western society, is one afraid of nature and being against nature. All we do is dominate and exploit animals. That's our basic relationship to the world, is dominating and exploiting forests and ecosystems. And so at a very powerful psychological level, we feel like we don't belong here, right? I mean, nature's out to get us. We're out to get the animals, and so we have a whole science, and a huge money-making science, I have to say, that propagates this idea that we're surrounded by these invisible or microorganisms that want to harm us. Even now, it's only been in the last 10 years, really, we've kind of figured out that our bodies actually have more microorganisms cells than our own body cells. Right? We have trillions and trillions of.
Here's a number, Will, so you can give it to them. You have 10 times more bacteria in your body than you have cells.
Right. 10 times exactly. So if bacteria were so bad, we would kill ourselves. We would die immediately if the bacteria were not there. And in terms of viruses, it's probably 100 or 1,000 times more viruses than there are cells in our body. So this idea that somehow viruses and bacteria are the enemy it sets us up for a massive amount of confusion and easily being exploited by industries that make money off of disease. They plant this idea that we're vulnerable to infections. It's always we're vulnerable to infections. We're always being told, oh gosh, be careful, you're going to get infected, but and then you have to take antibiotics for that. But I think our bodies are basically designed to eliminate toxins and to heal. And taking in antibiotics essentially is counterproductive, I think, primarily. I mean, most of the time, you're killing off a lot of beneficial bacteria, killing off things that really are important to us. And so, we look back in the past and we see these very highly respected doctors and surgeons that would bleed people, right? They would bleed people till they died a lot of times, and we look back and we say, oh my, they were so benighted, they were so in such a delusion, they actually believe that stuff. I'm sure in the future they're going to be looking back at the way we do medicine now and go, oh my god, they gave people antibiotics, they gave people all these toxic medications. I mean, what were they thinking? It's like we think we're so advanced. I mean, we do. I admit we do incredibly amazing things technologically with repairing joints and certain things like that. But the way we approach the kinds of chronic diseases with these horribly toxic chemicals and drugs that are anti-life, antibiotic.
That's what
And we're taught to
antibiotic
trust
means.
this.
Tell them, Dr.
Yeah,
Tuttle.
right. I mean, antibiotic means anti-life. It's trying to we think that that's somehow going to make us healthy. I mean, so really, it's time, I think, for us as individuals to stop, trusting doctors so much. I mean, I was born in a family that we didn't trust the doctors. My father was going to go into medicine. He decided not to, and he kind of taught us to never trust doctors. And I've stayed out of the doctor's office for 50 years. And I'm glad I did. But, I know some people have situations where you feel like you have to trust them, and, good luck. But I think, the most important thing is to take responsibility and question these narratives, because they may be in the future and even right now be seen to be really off base. One of the things I've realized is that doctors are not scientists. They're not they're not trained in science. I think I got more science training getting my PhD because I really studied. I actually did a lot of courses in quantitative and qualitative research methodologies and so forth. Doctors don't get that. Doctors learn protocols. They learn to follow a protocol, and they have to do it or they'll get sued. So they're in kind of like a golden prison where they just have to do what they're told, or they're going to be thrown out of the profession. So they're afraid to do anything outside of a protocol. And if the protocol that comes down from the CDC or comes down from whoever it is, it's directed by the pharmaceutical industry for profit. So you have to really understand that the system is not in place necessarily to maximize your health. It's in place to maximize profit. And that is not necessarily going to help. So we have to really be willing to ask the hard questions and go against a lot of the established wisdom and find out that our bodies are miraculous and they can heal amazingly well if we mobilize our mental, psychological, spiritual, and nutritional wisdom together. We have tremendous capacity. We don't have to rely on these toxic things necessarily.
And
Okay, so
yeah, and just one more thing about antibiotic, it actually gives the infection a chance to repeat itself again and again. How many women take antibiotic for urinary infection, and it comes back and back, ear infection, it comes back and back. So it actually just giving it a chance to repeat itself.
So what is the 10-second answer to, you said silver, is that the answer, Brian, that you're saying?
It's certainly in most cases, and I'm not totally against antibiotics. There's times and places for it. I'm not totally against allopathic medicine. I think there's a place and a time. I'm a guy that thinks a big round table is what's necessary in the 21st century. That we need to sit there, put our egos at the door and say, what are we really good at? I know what I'm good at, and that's what I love to do. And when we have doctors, medical doctors that work with us here, we have researchers that we access all of the time. So there's things I don't know and I'm not even frankly that interested in. And when we need their input, there's sometimes you need medical intervention. But I think what Dr. Tuttle said is a general statement I would agree with, that it's the poor doctors do it for the right reason. I mean, I've never, well, I shouldn't say never, very, 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 very rarely, once or twice, met a doctor that did it for money. When they were 18 or 19 years old, these kids said, I'm going to dedicate a decade or more of my life to educate. And it was always the story I heard. My mother died, my uncle died, my grandmother died. That's why I wanted to be a doctor. And then they get into a system that trains them to be glorified pharmacists, just to go through one prescription after another prescription. And if they talk out of line and try to do something that a specialist is going to do, they're going to lose their license and their livelihood and not be able to feed their family or pay their mortgage. This is a crazy system. Then you have lawyers basically that are telling you on international TV, sue these people for doing what they were told to do. It's no wonder when you go and you're overdosed. No wonder it's the #3 killer in the developed world today, because they overdose you on the drugs in fear that they're going to lose their license or be reprimanded for doing what they were trained to do. And then the pharmaceuticals walk away and say, we've never told you that. Well, they have told them that. The entire Trainings Act. Frankly, the way medicine's operating today, if you took online weekend programs for 5 weekends, you could probably be a doctor. Just plug in the disease. It will give you the 5 medicines that you basically can give people. And as long as you follow that list, you can keep your license.
But in terms of the specifics, if someone has an infection, is there an alternative to antibiotics that you recommend?
Yeah, well, that's the one that was used and we've seen successfully used, in my case, for half a century.
And how do you buy silver? You go to a drug health store.
You go to the health store. You can get it online. There's different types. There's ionic silvers, ones that are more effective in entering into the human cell. There are doctors that IV it into your body for infections that are really deep-seated within the human anatomy. You can apply it to the top of the skin when you have wounds, so it's not infection. I mean, it is so multi-purpose. It's amazing, but just think of the term that Dr. Tuttle said. It's anti-life. And once again, today in my presentation, Immunity IQ, that you can watch on The Real Truth, I talk about this in detail. The whole 2 hours was exactly what we're talking about now. And what I pointed out is that 80% of your immune system comes from healthy bacteria in the intestine. Antibiotics kill them. More importantly, is that 90% of the serotonin that keeps your mind from being depressed, that keeps you from having psychiatric concerns, 90% of it comes from healthy bacteria and in the intestinal tract. Those 2 facts alone should get you to avoid it. Now, are there times and places? Sure. You have an accident on a highway and you have infections because you have the road and dirt inside of your thing, and they're taking you to a hospital. I would certainly tell you that it would be a pretty wise thing to take an antibiotic to stabilize it. And then after that, rebuild the intestinal tract with these pre and probiotics that we spoke about.
Okay. So we have 12 minutes left. I have 12 questions. So quick 1-minute answers, no detail, because we want to get through all 12. People want to know your general response. What do you do? How do you prevent from breaking bones or having osteoporosis or any bone disease?
Weightlifting.
Weightlifting, resistant training.
Vegan diet.
With your opinion, not a fluff or not goodwill, the reality, how powerful is the mind and emotions on disease? Not some feel-good thing. What does the science really say about the real power of our minds on disease?
It's the most important aspect. It's what we use here first and foremost. And there's so much revelation and data and science on this today. You couldn't have a long enough life to read it all. Starting with my co-worker here, Dr. Rannicke, who worked with Dr. Carl Symington. Look at some of the new guys on this. Look at Bernie Siegel and the work that he did at Yale and then later on his own. The mind is powerful. Look at Dr. Larry Dossey and intent of spiritual intent and prayer. I mean, this just goes on and goes on. There's not a serious scientist today, a serious one, that doesn't look at this. If they're not talking about the mind and the importance of the mind, don't ever think that they know what's up. They're just out of the loop at this stage.
Yeah, Dr. Bruce Lipton's work is really helpful too, and there's many. It's true. Yeah. I mean, it's the new. Really, it's actually ancient wisdom. It's finally beginning to crack the edifice of a science that's really in many ways ignored this basic truth for too long.
Should everyone take alpha-lipoic acid?
I'm a major fan of alpha-lipoic acid. Our partner on campus, IVs it, and what it does to the immune system is spectacular. It's a protein they found initially in yeast in Italy, and it activates eosinophils, basophils, and neutrocytes, the fighters and killer cells of the immune function.
Should everyone take magnesium supplement?
If you're not eating lots of raw almonds, and if you're in America, you're probably not. They've cooked and irradiated the almonds now. Magnesium is a very important one. It relaxes the muscle, and your heart happens to be a muscle. Something I take every day, although I don't need it.
You've talked about concerns with fruit. How do ripe tomatoes fit into the plan?
Tomatoes are one of the best fruits on the planet Earth. It contributes to cardiovascular health, prostate cancers, and swollen prostate and breast cancers. Amazing. Lycopene is in there. Brilliant work that's been done on that all over the world. And I'm a major fan of it. It's one of the very first fruits I'm going to tell you to eat, a ripe organic tomato when you're told not to eat fruit for a while.
Rich in glutathione.
Very rich in glutathione.
How do potatoes, for people who are not going to be raw, how do potatoes, red, white, purple potatoes fit into your plan? Or any plan?
Very sorry, Dr. McDougall. White potatoes are not healthy for you. When you cook a white potato, they're pretty much all starch. You look at nightshade families. I happened to go to Rutgers University in 1971 and met the guy that was doing the research there. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't ask the right questions, and not a great thing. Sweet potatoes, yams, totally different, great foods for you. You can eat sugars because they're high in sugar.
Should everyone take flour or bee pollen? Doesn't it have sugar in it?
No. Flour and bee pollen has minimal amounts of sugar, like a red pepper would have. It's something that Anna Marie and I take every single day. Really, really pure vegans would never take a bee pollen because the bees are abused in it. I may say this is one of the abbreviations I make myself because nutritionally, they have approximately the same amount, about 5% difference in flower pollen. But flower pollens are collected by human hands. The best one is called ceratine. It's out of Sweden.
Cernitol.
Cernitol.
And it really helps with the prostate balance and I mean testosterone balance, and especially for prostate.
Yeah, look at it. Look at some authorities on this. It's just amazing. There's about 2.5 pages of what's in it now. Every year they find 5 more things that's in a bee pollen.
Should everyone take an ionic form of zinc? And what does ionic mean?
If you're going to take zinc, ionic forms, or any other mineral, if you look at the advice from the US government 4 Christmases ago, they told women, stop taking calcium supplements. Why? Not because they became nice people all at once. They were paying about $9 billion a year for women who had stroke, who had no insurance. So why? Because they grind up oyster shells that are not calcium you can use, or eggshells, or even worse than that, chalk, which gives you cancer. And so you cannot use it. Ionic means electrically charged. Every single mineral and every single living plant is electrically charged. And how it really absorbs, you can get into detail with some of the things I've done on The Real Truth About Health before, is that there's an electromagnetic connectivity between the human cell electron and the food itself, and the real absorption comes through living food. When you cook a food, and this is where I would like to have debates with some of my colleagues who think cooked food just so wonderful for you, you basically don't have that ability to absorb it at a deep level. And most of the nutrient and ionic frequency is gone.
Should everyone take ionic selenium? Where do you get these type of minerals?
The company out of San Diego, the Eden, E-D-I-O-N company, I think they helped to sponsor The Real Truth for a couple of years, is the one we found to be best. Inexpensive, very, very effective. They mimicked exactly what you see in these plants, the living plants. And I can tell you something, selenium is not in any of the foods anymore. The best case scenario is you have to add selenium into your organic soil to even get it. And very few people do that.
Isn't it in Brazil nuts?
You get some in Brazil nut, but when they tested Brazil nut, only 2 out of 10 have high amounts of it.
Should we avoid airplanes due to the radiation that you're exposed to?
Well,
and how do you minimize the radiation if you have to fly?
If I said yes, I'd be a hypocrite. I've been really healthy the last year. I haven't been doing too much flying, but you can't avoid radiation in a plane. You get cosmic radiation. Worst time is to fly during the day when I always flew. So I don't want to fly overnight and be spaced out when I'm doing lectures the next day. And so you can wear around your neck something that Anna Marie and the Germans put together called high pulse. You can also wear around your neck a personalized oxygen machine. And Anna Maria fixes this to her body every single day. We've never closed. We have people coming in. Everyone's tested here at Hippocrates. We're filled with guests right now from all over. And the reality is you can wear that. That helps the oxygen level stay up. And we also put silver up our nose every hour, 2 puffs up each nostril, suck in, 2 puffs down the throat to keep the infection rate down, because they recycle the air for the last 10 years on planes and evenly distribute disease and disorder.
Are hot peppers good for us? What about really hot peppers?
Depends upon what they are. Some of them have aggravants in it. Cayenne pepper is a hot pepper, excellent for you. Matter of fact, it helps your blood. It helps circulation. It actually moves through the capillaries, which are where 74% of all the blood move through these really invisible microscopic capillaries, more blood flow. So really great thing. But jalapenos, on the other hand, have an oil in it that can be an aggravant for people.
What is gluten and should we be avoiding it? Everyone talks about being gluten-free.
Gluten's a protein within grains, and the body has an allergic reaction to it. And although I don't agree with most of what Dr. Gungridge says, he's right on this. And the reality is the body's reactive to it. When you and I were kids and we were in school, plaster of Paris was gluten. So when we made those statues and little things that we put together, homes, etc., that was gluten you were making. Can you imagine what that does in the intestinal tract? And the body doesn't know how to deal with that. Going back to what I said with the work of Dr. Leakey, a legitimate anthropologist who did the work necessary to show we were plant eaters. We weren't hunters, we were plant eaters. He basically shows you, by the way, we weren't even eating grains for most of the time. The only time we ate grains, nuts, beans, and seeds was when there were droughts. The rest of the time we ate vegetables and fruits. That was our primary diet.
Should we?
Also, I just want to say a lot of people have a problem with wheat because it's sprayed with Roundup. And it's just, the glyphosate is used as a desiccant, and it's just sprayed, even though it's not genetically engineered. It's sprayed, and so people are eating all this glyphosate, and that's destroying our microbiome, because glyphosate is a broad spectrum antibiotic itself. And so the people that say, "Oh, I can't eat this; it makes me feel sick," it's also possibly the glyphosate load that they're eating if it's not organic.
Absolutely.
Should we take DHEA if we are low in it?
If you want it, the one who makes it the best is one of our alumni who healed herself here, and that's Heather Mills. It's out of England. So look up Heather Mills. She makes the cleanest, purest DHEA. Almost all other companies have accelerants in it and different chemicals they extract with it, and not so good for you. One other company is out of Norway. Make sure you get the right one, not the fish oil variety they make, unfortunately. It's called Zino, Z-I-N-Z-I-N-O, which is DHEA. Or, by the way, algae within themselves inherently have DHEA in it.
Okay. I'd like for each of you to give a 30-second closing, please. Dr.
Tuttle?
All right. Well, when I heard this was going to be like 2.5 hours, I thought, man, that's a long time, but the time has flown by.
Now we need another 2.5.
And it's been really enlightening and a great pleasure. And thank you, Steve. Thank you so much to the wonderful directors of Hippocrates Health Institute. And thank you, everyone, for your attention. Go forth and multiply this message. It's really critical. All this information is really important. Thank you for the opportunity. And please come by our website, worldpeacediet.com, please. Thanks.
Yeah, get Will Tuttle's book about the peace diet. It's wonderful. So I want to thank you. I want to thank Stephen Shore for making this possible, and everybody behind you there too. It's an honor to be on this program, and anybody that has questions, of course, can follow us on our website too. And we love to help everybody. We love to make sure that we can create balance. If there are questions about anything that we talked about tonight, then we can clarify it, because this is so important for us. This is the future of humans. This is a future of our earth. And, you know, this is much bigger than all of us. But I think this is a program, this is a way that we can share it. And I'm really grateful.
Yes. Well, I want to start by telling you, Stephen, maybe in the deepest way I've ever done in all the years I've known you, what admiration and respect I have for you. I know I've had the great privilege to know a lot of really important and famous people in my life. I'm married to a woman I have enormous respect for, and I thank God every day. She's my wife, and she's the mother of my children and the co-director of Hippocrates. But I can tell you, there's very few people like you on the planet Earth. That you're an extraordinary human being to do what you've done for 8 years and to make this information available and to bring together people who really, really want to help is exceptional. And I'm just so proud to call you a friend. I'm proud of you as a human being. And if everyone can just look at you and practice a little bit of what you're doing, we'd all be a hell of a lot better off. So thanks for bringing, once again, the 8th year now, The Real Truth About Health. Thanks for bringing us all together. Dr. Tuttle, who has become certainly a major part of our family here, and our visiting faculty member. And thank to all of you listening all over the world, and recognize that fear is what makes you sick. So eliminate fear, gain knowledge, try the things that resonate with you. And before you know it, you're going to be playing a concert in life that's going to even fool you. God bless all of you, and thanks for being here with us tonight.
One more thing, Will, if people want to follow up with you and get in touch with you, say again slowly how people follow up with you, get in touch with you, and see what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's just worldpeacediet.com or my name, willtuttle.com. You have there our videos, our schedule, articles, everything. Yeah, you can right there, willtuttle.com or worldpeacediet.com.
And Brian, Anna Marie, if someone wants to learn more about Hippocrates Health Institute, if people want to visit, if they want a phone consultation, if they want to learn more about what you do, how would they follow up with you?
Books, you know. So we have a lot of offerings here. So you can get on the internet and look us up. It's HippocratesInstitute.org. We're a nonprofit. So it's HIPP, like Paul, OCRATES. HIPPOCRATES. And then, of course, Institute, INSTITUTE.org. And you can look into our online offerings, our on-campus offerings, everything from weight regulation programs to comprehensive cancer programs, to sleep programs, to advanced transformational programs, to psychotherapy programs. And we welcome anyone that wants to join the human race. Boy, we need some members at this point.
So I'd like to ask if you could unmute all the audience members so they can thank Will, Anna Marie, and Brian now. So please unmute everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You guys are doing a great job.
Akshay, thank you.
Enjoyed it
Thank you.
immensely.
Great job.
Thank you.
Really great.
Bless you.
Thank you.